Hello, this is Kirby Meister 2, and these are my reviews, and today I will be reviewing Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood, the sequel to the expansion Heavensward, and A Realm Reborn. Before I get on with the review, for those that are watching it and haven't played A Realm Reborn and its expansion, I recommend doing so. This review most likely will contain some spoilers for those two games, so if you don't want to be spoiled, just stop watching this video. So, Stormblood. Like I said before, it's the second expansion of Final Fantasy A Realm Reborn. Set in the Far East, Stormblood introduces new areas inspired by old Japanese culture. Included with these new areas are the mechanics like swimming, diving, and 2 new classes. Will Stormblood be as good or better as Heavensward, or will this one be the worst so far? Let's find out. Let's get up to speed with Stormblood's story by talking about some of the storyline that happens during the patches. At the end of Heavensward, Instinian, holding the eyes of Nidhogg after defeating those that have corrupted Ishgard, has been devoured by the Rim's rage and turned into his great Rim form. The now revived Nidhogg prepares to attack Ishgard again, only to be thwarted by the adventurers again, having to lose control of the Red Dragoon after his defeat when they decide to throw his eyes into the depths of a cold mountain range. Ilberd, a scorned man that has tried many attempts to reclaim his lost home before and during the events of Heavensward and miserably failed, masked as the great leader known as the Griffin, enjoys the Alamegan resistance. During an attack at Belzer's Ward near Grindinia, he reveals that he spurred the attack at the wall so that the Alliance would have no choice but to free Alamega from Garlemald rule. In desperation, he pinningly reveals as well that he obtains Nidhogg's eyes. Unsatisfied that the Alliance might not be willing to do his bidding, he concludes to his last resort. He commits suicide in order to summon a primal far worse than Bahamut, Shinryu. Papalymo boldly sacrifices himself to seal the primal in a cocoon, but his life ends when its raw power overwhelms him. In a way to best the new primal, the adventurers get the help of a former antagonist, Naruto Scavia, and Sid Garland, in order to awaken the Elegon superweapon Omega, a machine that was able to sail Bahamut during the Calamity. The two fight in a titanic clash of power, which ends in a stalemate as both of them fall to different points of the Far East. There are also some events that happen during this that link to Stormblood that I forgot to mention. Gosetsu of the Far East and friend of Yurgiri arrives at Mordana in hopes of releasing his home from Garlemald rule. After the death of her master and being released from his spell, Lise reveals that she pretended to be her sister Hida after she was killed 6 years ago when she ran away from her hometown, Alamega. Stirred by the cruel recent events that happened upon her own kind, and resolving her sister's wish to liberate her hometown, she begs her allies to help her in her cause. They agree and head out to the Far East. As they do, a new enemy from the Garlemald Empire reveals himself as Xenos Galvas, leader of the 12th Legion and ruler of the land. Stormblood's story, continuing from the patches, is very heartwarming and emotional. Like the battle between the Holy See of Ishgard and the Horde of Dragons during the Dragonsong War, war has not been kind to the Far East. Because of this, a lot of trust was broken. It was badly damaged to the point that outsiders from the west were seen as those of Garlemald, just to evade a weak and dwindling country. Those that fled away from their homelands during the resistance were seen as cowards and traitors, and those that were defeated during the resistance were seen as broken and unable to repair their hope. The 20 years of Garlemald world has harshly broken these lands. Because of the severity of the situation at hand, some characters seen before the expansion developed greatly over time. Lise, returning from her homeland, sees how much damage has been brought to it. She is called a traitor by her people, and to regain their trust, proves that she is willing to again spark the revolution by helping those that lost their spirit. Conrad at first doesn't believe the true nature of her actions. One of the leaders of the real resistance before it was used in its corruptions by Aelberd. He is a man that is fair in doubting the Alliance a bit. The Alliance was not willing to help during the resistance, and only now after the spark at Bowser's War did they finally come when it was too late, and a little bit hesitant at that. He has seen a lot of his own men being killed for nothing but false promises, and he feels salt to the wound when he experiences one of his own that is called a traitor almost doing the same thing. His best warriors were used as puppets during Aelberd's attacks, and those that have stayed know not well how to fight. He has his own reasons for some distrust at the beginning of the story, but eventually learns how to trust people again as Lise proves herself what is worth fighting for during many actions that I will not reveal. Lastly, one protagonist players will be Hyen, but since he's shown later in the story, I will not talk about him, but give a little bit preview what he's like.
Say no more, Yogiri. Say no more. I observed how you helped Cyrano, to whom I am deeply indebted. For that, and for the aid you provided my people, you have my deepest gratitude.
Anyways, Stormblood out of all three games might have the best, more interesting villains. Let me explain. Three of them are called Zenus Yaegavus, Yotsutsu, or sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and Fordola. Despite his looks shown in the game, Zenus is not one to be fooled. He demands fights to test power, and he sees no survival in the ones that are weak and powerless. And if he finds those that can't control a situation well, he utterly destroys them, not with strength, but words of discouragement, too. This is what ultimately controls his viceroy, Yotsutsu, who has betrayed her own kind in hopes of survival. She's kind of a dick. She manipulates her own kind to do her own bidding, to the point that she commands one of her own to shoot another in the hopes of survival. And lastly, there is Fordola, who I won't talk much about because she has their own thing that extends to the end of the story, so I'll just leave it to that. If there's one thing to complain with these antagonists, it's that one of them decides to do a 180 out of nowhere, and because of this, they become more of a one-dimensional character, and they are seen as less as the three, which is a shame because the game really showed how menacing they can be, but we will be shown Cuckoo for Cocobuds later in the story, which is a damn shame. I just wonder what Square Enix was thinking at the time. So with that out of the way, how's the gameplay? Well, first off, a lot of things have changed with the classes and how they're played. Some of the skills are now removed and replaced with new ones, and other ones have been tweaked to make some more sense. The level system has jumped to level 70 with new skills added. As a player that mains Monk, let me explain some of the changes. First, the one elm punch doesn't remove enemy buffs anymore. It is now a short second stun skill that is only for a few seconds, which I find pointless to use in a dungeon run, while the skill was already pointless to use always, except for PvP, I suppose, but I'm just rambling on. A skill that was also removed, I think, is Featherfoot, since monks are more evasive than before. In addition to Monk having some elemental prowess this time, the tackle skill can now not only just stun enemies, but can either hit harder if in the fire element or can knock them back further with the rock elements. Also, there's this pretty cool thing now. It's a new UI element in the game that shows how many chakras are open and if the 3 stages of the rotations are full to do that powerful attack. Pretty useful stuff this time, so you don't have to see the timer for those limitations. As for the new classes that are introduced in the expansion, there are the Samurai and the Red Mages. During the short time I had for the review, however, I was only able to decide between one of the 2 classes. So, despite it would have been pretty predictable for me to play a class based on Japanese lore, being the esteemed weeaboo that I am, I chose to play Red Mage instead because Red Mages are an interesting class choice. Red Mage is the jack of all trades, master of none class, and the way that the game utilizes this is well done. Red Mages use both black and white magic. To raise each level is by using spells that can raise them, so the trick is to balance them, which can be done by using 2 skills, Scatter and Jolt. The difference between these skills is that while both of them can raise magic at the same level, one is better for a solo target while the other one is good for a group. After using one of the 2 skills, players can cast Ver Thunder and Ver Aerial. Why? Well, the Red Mage has a thing called Dual Cast that instantly casts the next spell, and the first elemental skills are the longest to cast. Wait, first? Yes, after the first set of the elemental skills, there is another set of them called Ver Fire and Ver Stone that has the possibility of being casted if the RNG gods allow it. Or if the time allows it, players can just use acceleration because that just instantly allows players just to use the second set of skills without any problems. It just has to be pressed first before the second set. I mean, not second set, first set. So after getting 100 on both sides, players can use the true power of the rotational skills. Riposte, Kachu, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and Redoublement. Alright, so this class can not just only use white and black magic, but they can also use a sword. So, what else can this awesome class do? I'm glad you asked, Jimmy. Probably not your name. For this class at level 54 and 64, retrieves Vercure and Verraise. Which are basically healing and reviving skills. Like the first elemental skills, Verraise takes a long time to use. So, what I usually do is use Vercure and then Verraise as a tactical element. So, despite the class being cool and all, it has one trap, and that is just using one skill and one skill only during dungeon robs, especially when it comes to mobs. And what is that skill? Well, Scatter, because it's the easiest to cast and it attacks nearby enemies. So if you do anything else, players will just kind of like, hey, why didn't you use this skill they did here? It's just gonna make the thing longer, dude. And while I kind of agree on the usefulness, it just kind of makes the whole experience of this class just monotonous and boring. But once boss fights come, it just gets a little bit better because of the whole one focus thing. It's just doing this for so long as a red mage, it kind of can be a little bit tiresome to play this class. It's not the class that's bad, it's just the community towards it. It's just so damn elitist. Like, come on, people, this is just a game. So, what else is there besides the changes to the classes and the new classes? Well, Flying makes its return, And it's like the same as Heavensward, unfortunately, in that players have to do quests and search Aether Currents again. Square Enix, I don't know if you recall, but no one liked this part of the mechanic. Don't get me wrong, I love the flying mechanic from the last expansion, but why in God's name did you have to include the worst part that no one wanted to have? Getting Aether Currents from finding them in the maps and doing certain quests were the worst thing to have as an incentive to explore. There's a better way to explore these new lands, and that's just by going around just to gain the EXP, just by exploring them and just doing quests to go around and enjoy the view. None of this matters. Like, come on. So why is it better to do all these quests and locating all these places? Well, because the main story quests and dungeons still have the level gates in order for players to grind them. That's the real incentive of why we do it. It's not because of Aether Currents. It's because of all these other things. So don't put this system when it shouldn't even be used. When making the next expansion, I hope you finally realize this, Square Enix, because it's bugging the shit out of me. And I expect it's bugging the shit out of other people too. It's just an unnecessary system, and it's just so bad. Sorry, I kind of get into a rant. So besides flying, Stormblood introduces swimming and diving into the new areas. Swimming is very accessible. You just go to Rogger's Reach, and that's all you can do. Just jump in the water and you can actually swim. As for diving, it's a little bit more later on when players go to Ruby Sea. And that's not hard. It's easily accessible when doing a quest. And it's just done like that. Okay, so as fun as the mechanic is, I just kind of wish there was a little bit more to it, like a PvP sport, like that one game, Blitzball. Yeah, a lot of people during the beginning of the game really wanted that, and comparing to flying, it's a little bit slower, but I can see the fun in it just to see the depths of the ocean and sea. Speaking about gorgeous, in addition to Final Fantasy, A Realm Reborn, and Heavensward, the expansion has a lot of gorgeous scenery. These new locations to me are even aesthetically, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, aesthetically better than the locations than Heavensward's. My favorite places have to be Rhaegar's Reach, or Rhaegar's Reach, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Kugane, the Ruby Sea, Azim Steppe, and Yangxia. Sorry if I also pronounced that wrong. Here, let me show you examples of these gorgeous places. Besides the locations, the characters are pretty good for the most part. My favorite character designs are Lise, Gosetsu, Yotsutsu, and Zenos, and Hien. As for NPC characters, there are the Kojin and Lupin Beast Tribes with their Kappa and Lycanthrope designs. As for my favorite creatures that roam around in the land, there are these purple butterfly things near Rogar's Reach, tigers, and there are so much more that I can show. If there's one thing a little bit to harp on, it's that Stormblood unfortunately comes to the trap of recycling enemies. From time to time, these come to taking enemies from the past games and putting them in locations, not naming them differently, just the same. And then you got bigger versions of enemies, and that's all I can really harp on. Like, that's the only problem I can see. As for the music, it is great. Although I have to admit, my favorite song has to be Doma Castle's theme. Just that beginning riff is so nice, and just the way just the groove is really good. Now, the only problem that I have to say is that the battle music in this game compared to the other two has to be the weakest. I just don't know why. It's just not as good or memorable as the other two. But that's just my opinion. With that all said, I enjoyed Stormblood despite the certain flaws. The story is great despite some things. The gameplay is good with a few hiccups, like some of the skills for the monk and the swimming mechanic. And that they also had to introduce the worst part in flying. Anyways, the game looks great while there's some recycled enemies. And the best part has to be the music, despite the battle music not being as good as the other two. In the end, I highly recommend getting this expansion for those that have already have the previous one in the vanilla game. Overall, it's a great expansion to have that is not to be missed this year, and I will continue to play as soon as I get more money to pay for the subscription. Anyways, this is Kirby Meister 2, signing out.